Sometimes when we do a car audio install, we want to be able to easily remove the amplifier. As an example, let's say that we've added a subwoofer box and amplifier combo into a trunk of a vehicle, and let's say we're going on a trip, we need that extra space, we want to remove the system. What are some steps that we can do with our install in order to be able to remove the installation easily? One of the things we have to address is a quick disconnect power connection. This big beefy connector allows us to connect and disconnect our main power wire and our ground wire. But is this quick disconnect worth it? Is it robust? Is it actually simple to connect and disconnect? How do we connect the wires into it? Let's dive on into this and take a look. Let's start with taking a look at our quick disconnect by seeing everything that's included in the package. Now, this particular version that I'm using is the 2 to 4 gauge version. You can see they also have a smaller version that's for 6 to 10 gauge, and there's also a larger version for 0 gauge. As always, I'll link this as well as the other versions down in the video description for you guys to take a look at. First, we have the instructions here, and something I want to point out that you want to take note of is the maximum current handling capability of whatever model you're purchasing. This will be listed in the product description. For 4 gauge wire, we're limited to about 125 amps of current handling capability, so the fact that this has 175 amps, it's overrated, it's going to work just fine. Next, we have the housings and the contacts. The contacts obviously attach to the wires and they go inside the housings. And what's unique about these housings is they are keyed so that they can only go together one way. That way you're not accidentally connecting the positive to the ground. And you'll also notice that they have these holes in them. What's nice about those holes is we can use it to mount onto a box or onto our amp panel, anything like that, just to keep these more constrained. Now, if your installation didn't allow these to be mounted onto something, or if you wanted to keep them free floating, they also include these. So what these are for is you see they have this cable on them, and we can actually attach this to a bolt within the vehicle, and then this is basically just a dummy plug for us to plug this into and secure it. Now, right now it's a little loose, and that's just because the contacts aren't in this yet. Once the contacts are in, this holds much more tight. So I'll show you guys that in a little bit. Now, we need to attach the wires into the contacts. According to the instructions, I need to remove 1 1/16 inch of the insulation from the wires. I'm doing this by using an Olfa knife and making sure that I don't cut into the wire itself. I'm just cutting the insulation and I pull the insulation away. Now I can insert the wire into the contact. Now I'm going to get out my hydraulic crimping tool, and I actually made a video about this in the past. You can check it out at the link up in the corner of the screen. I select the size of the pair of dies that will work well for this contact, and then I add them into the crimping tool and secure them in place with the crimping tool's pin. Now that the crimper is all prepared, I add the wire and contact combo inside of the jaws of the crimper and I start crimping. Now, I have to use quite a bit of force to get this hydraulic crimper to work, so sometimes it's easier to just do things on the ground. Since these contacts are so long, I ended up crimping it twice in 2 different spots. Once I'm done crimping, I release the hydraulic pressure and remove the contact. Give it a quick tug test to make sure it's not going to disconnect from the wire. Now, you'd want to repeat this process for all 4 wires. In this case, I'm only going to do 2 because I don't know what project I'm going to use this in the future. So just for now, just doing 2. I noticed that with 1 1/16 inch of the insulation removed, we still have a little bit of wire sticking out here. So for the second one, I actually cut it down to about 1 inch, which seemed to work a little bit better. But nevertheless, we're going to cover these and protect them with heat shrink. We'll just slide it on here, and now we will heat it up. If we look closely at these contacts, you can see on the right side over here, you can see that slight little hook. When we go to put these in the connector, we want to line up that hook so that it is facing that metal tab that's inside of these. So in other words, once it's inside, it's going to be in this orientation. To add these in is really easy. You just want to make sure that you're putting the wire on the correct labeled side. So this is our positive wire. We'll line it up and we push it in until we hear a click. Let's do the same for our ground wire. Push it in until we hear the click. Now, the way that these contacts secure in here is solid. You are not going to pull these out. Now, a quick side note, if you did need to take these contacts out, it's pretty easy to do so. You just take a small flathead screwdriver and you push it in there and you actually just push that retaining tab down and then you can pull the contact out. Once we have all 4 of the contacts added in, you can see that once again, we can't plug in positive to negative. It just doesn't work that way. It won't work. We can only plug positive to positive. And there we go. Now I have to say this has a robust hold. This is not going to come apart unless you really want it to. I mean, it's not super hard to take apart, but my point is you have to kind of work it to actually get it to come apart. It's not going to just rattle loose. Something else to note here, like I was talking about in the beginning of the video, these things, if you do need to unplug it, you obviously don't want these live wires just sitting in your trunk where they can potentially arc against something. You have to cover up those contacts. So you could just have this attached to something. Now it's nice and secure. You can see it's much more tight now that the contacts are in there. And you could use this loop to secure it somewhere within the vehicle so you're not worried about it rattling around or bouncing around. Now all I need to do is prep the wiring and add some wire ferrules. If you aren't familiar with these, I'll put a link for you guys at the end of the video that you can check out, but we'll install these into the amplifier and tighten everything down. So we've got the amplifier all ready to go. Now another note for you guys, this would obviously be connected to either the battery or a distribution center through a fuse. You always have to follow standard installation procedures. It is important to have a fuse on this wire, and you should remove the fuse before you go to connect these two together. This is called out in the instructions. Do not assemble the connector to live wires. In this case, we're not live, so I'll go ahead and assemble the wires together. And one final note, I did do a resistance check earlier when the wires weren't connected to just measure the resistance across the connections. The resistance was nearly zero. I wouldn't be concerned about it at all. So there we have it, the quick disconnect. I like this thing. It makes it easy to remove your system if you'd like to do so. And a quick reminder, don't forget that I showed you guys the 4 gauge to 2 gauge version in this video, but there is larger and smaller versions as well that I'll link down in the video description. Check out some of my other related videos here on screen, and a special thanks goes out to John, Brian, John, Steve, Jerry, Emmanuel, James, and Colin, and the rest of the Patreon membership team. A big thanks to those guys for helping me with the making of these videos. If you'd like to check that out, check it out down below. As always, thank you for watching.